Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, my precious pack, and welcome back once more to VEGA Conflict. And we have a short tutorial, or something like, well, not short, it's actually 20 some odd minutes long, but a few people will recognize these as the Venoms that I use, and this is with Fleet Commander Clay. This is the same fleet, and we're going to be picking up where I left off. We're going to be advancing you into the Axis tier. Now, we're not just going to stop at farming for the cargo themselves. We're actually going to go as far as we can get with this fleet, and we're going to farm mark upgrades as well. And one thing I want to say now, there are for the 89 fleet, you can defeat it, and that's why the video is so long, because the final clip, which is like 7 minutes long, is of that final fight against the 89. And if you bring a follow-up fleet, you can destroy it. If you use the Venoms to open up the fleet and things like that, you can then bring in something like a Punisher fleet, because the only thing left is a carrier, because no matter what I did, I was not capable of using the Venoms to destroy the carrier, because a single squadron was always making through. I just wasn't able to kill them at all. And that's due to how the game displays where they're actually at compared to them not actually being there, and it's just a stupid visual bug, and you may destroy them, but you'll still take damage even if they were destroyed before they entered firing range, which is nonsensical to me. But first up, we have the cargo fleet. And the cargo fleet is the primary target you're going to want for the Axis battleship, the Enforcer. And it, along with the cluster missile, I believe is what it drops with. No, it drops with a torpedo. I can't remember the name of the torpedo now. How sad is that? That just goes to show that I never used it. But in most cases, you can destroy these squadrons like this, and I mean, they go down extremely easily. And the farming process, due to the 6-minute repair time of these ships, you'll have very few issues with actually losing the ships, or even repairing them at that. So don't be afraid to make mistakes while you're using this fleet, because they are extremely forgiving, unlike some other fleets. And again, same tactic you're going to employ in most of the targets, but most of these attacks were actually my first attacks against them, and I recorded them so I could see where I could improve. And you actually get to see that happening as the fights progress. You'll see me slowly moving the battleships a little bit further forward, being a little bit more aggressive with the tactics, but then you'll see me towards the end beginning to use the battleships a little bit more carefully. And towards the end, you'll see me almost perfectly go through a fight where I mess up in the fight before against the 87. You'll see exactly what I mean. Like this. This isn't the ideal way to bring a battleship into a fight, and it's been a long time since I used battleships of any kind, because I primarily use cruisers. But what you would want to do here is you'd want to angle the ships out so that the enemy is in the almost behind your ships, basically. You see the end of the firing arc towards the ships that are being fired at. You want them to be towards the back of your fleet, and you want them to be just on the edge of that firing arc, so you can be firing on them, but they'll be missing most of their shots against you. It'll prevent losses of ships and things like what you just saw. And again, I repeat the same mistake of trying to get them in close, but I picked up on it fairly quickly in the second and third and fourth fight, and I slowly began to implement it and just move in a way that it was difficult for them to hit. And here you can see it's actually happening without me actually intending it, them getting caught towards the end of the firing arc, missing their attacks mostly, and being destroyed. And you could avoid the ships being destroyed primarily by simply utilizing what I just said. Make sure the enemy is towards the back of the firing arc, the end of the firing arc, and make sure you're always leading. And again, the carriers are easy in the lower levels, and you can destroy the drones extremely quickly with a quick barrage of the Mannifold missiles on approach to the target. And the best way to look at this Every time you lose a ship, it's not going to be 1 hour of repair time, it's going to be 1 minute of repair time per ship, so 3 minutes repair time. For any of them that only lose about 6 of their health, it's only going to be free repair time. Because they have a 6-minute repair time, and if you lose, 5/5 of their health, you're going to get a free repair time, so that's the best way to look at it. And these ships only have 2,000 hit points. Well, actually they have 1,970. They have under 2,000, but I mean, it's close enough, we'll classify it as 2,000. And as you can see, they're having no issues farming for them, and this is with a maxed out clay. So your results are naturally going to be different, but you'll be able to take in what I already know and farm XP as well, because the faster you rank him up, the sooner you can get all of the higher level targets and things like that. But the things to take away from this are going to be, while you're in the fight, try and get the targets towards the back of your firing arc. And you can see me actually beginning to do it here. I'm trying to get the battleships to turn in so I can take advantage of them, and I start to get them to go towards the back of the firing arc. I mean, that one turned in way too far and it actually ripped the fleet up, but again, these ships have such a low repair time and stuff like that, they're forgiving when you make a mistake because it's not going to cost you an hour of repair time. It's only going to cost you 1 minute per ship. And alternatively, a better way to approach this, if you feel comfortable enough, drop a mid-guard carrier in. Use the increased agility to hit the targets and then fall out of their attack range, because that will be another one that will greatly help you. Another thing to remember and to take advantage of is the actual hitbox model and what you can fire at. And this is where it gets interesting. You see me break the ships off into 2 fleets because I need at least 2 of them to survive until the end so I can destroy the carrier. Now, because of how it is, this is exactly what I mean. It will miss almost every single shot against that one ship, whereas you get to close in on it. Pick it apart, and victory. All because of the slow-moving dumbfire weapons. In a way, this is more than a tutorial as well. This is kind of an inspiration to show that you don't need high-end tech all the time, because you always see me fighting with dreadnoughts. Well, they're not always necessary. High-end tech is necessary for some fights, but to get to the high-end tech, you can sometimes use cheap, disposable ships, as you see here. And the carriers just kind of melt bit by bit as you hammer away at them. Just like that, victory. And on to the ones that take up most of the video. As you can probably guess, it's pretty late, but I'm doing this because I have the intention of just trying to make sure content goes out, but there's something helpful for everyone. So for anyone trying to advance, well, you've got 2 ways to advance. Cheap way, which is also a grindy way, or the official way, which is also a grindy way. The difference is, one is more forgiving of mistakes than the other. Because at the end of the fight, you're still going to be getting the same amount of everything that you would otherwise. And for the fights that you can't finish, but you can heavily damage a fleet using this cheap little tactic, well, just look at it this way. You can bring in a secondary fleet that is actually built to destroy the target or built to finish a target. And looking at it this way, there's just a carrier left at the end of the 89 if you fly just right. And that means you just have to bring something to counter a carrier as well as its squadrons. And you're good. And here's what I mean. Utilizing the end of the firing arc, the targets are typically missing. As long as you can keep them at a certain angle, you'll be fine. And I want them to be engaging that far back battleship, that single Venom, on the outer edge towards them, because it'll mean that they're going to be missing most of their shots. And this is where I make a mistake, because I hadn't fought the suppressor before in the fights. And again, first fight, so my first thought was I'll try and treat it like a battleship. And that was a mistake. I'm trying to ease it into the firing arc so I can fire on it a little bit whilst running away. As you can see, it kind of works out, but it also kind of doesn't. 2 battleships gone from a single mistake. How would you counter that? Well, there's actually 2 ways. 1, apply stasis to the target to slow it down to give you a little bit more lead, but as you can see, it wasn't too much of an issue. The carrier, on the other hand, is going to be an issue. And just completely ignoring the battleships over there, because the carrier right now, since I've engaged, I can't run away or else it'll destroy the Venoms. So it's a matter of getting to it now, destroying it without losing them, because they're the only thing that we have left right now. And we're going to attack multiple times on the same target, so sometimes the fight will be 7 minutes if you use this tactic. But it's more time consuming this way, because you get to actually sit down and play for a longer period of time instead of running the fleets in the ground, which is what I used to do. And what I still kind of do. And the targets, as you can see, again, right up to the 87, the carriers aren't really a threat because you can destroy most of them in a single barrage, but when a single drone makes it to your fleet, oh boy, do they just wreak havoc. We got 2 ships left against 3 battleships. Should be an easy fight, right? Honestly, yeah, it is. You'll have no issues finishing this type of fight if it's the battleships against your Venoms. All you have to do is just remember, keep them at the back of your firing arc, stay ahead of them, lead, but do not follow. Make sure that they're always trailing you, and you can do this. Now, mistake there. Anyone notice? Anyone? I want them to be in the opposite firing arc than the one I'm trying to get them to fight in. I want them to be following me, not trying to lead. And right now they're trying to lead because I have to turn into them to fight back. And now you see, correction of that issue. And again, keep them towards that very end of the firing arc and lead them into their death. One by one, the battleships will fall, and you'll have no issues just farming them like this. So even a ship that's critically damaged can be the difference between completing this fight or failing it. Naturally, these will be the mistakes that you'll look at and you'll think to yourselves, well, we won't do that. Now that we've seen the video, we know exactly what to do. So you should be able to farm the targets reliably and easily. And another thing to do, due to how the firing mechanic works, they'll do a direct line of fire. You should have no issues at all, so long as you turn a little bit. And what I mean by that is most weapons fire exactly to the point where your ship is at the moment they're loaded. So if you turn a bit, you'll angle and you'll redirect exactly where your ship is going, so that there's less of a chance of them hitting your hitbox, which will in turn allow you to just walk away. Now, we did most of these with nothing more than Venoms, Mannifold Venoms, with under 2,000 hit points because of clay. And due to the level of these fleets and the maximum level cap of clay being level 70, you should be able to get him into the mid-50s fairly easily fighting these targets. And once you get him to about 50, 55, that's where it starts to become easier to farm them. So to begin with, you're going to be troubled, and every now and then you're going to lose a ship in a single shot, because clay boosts them to over 6 times the amount of health they have by default. Well, 5 times the amount of health they have by default without breaking a sweat. But as you can see, the difference between having clay and not is a little bit more forgiving. Because again, these are very, very cheap ships with a lack of durability. And if you add Victoria Onin to this fleet, if you can farm her in an event using a cheap tactic against something like the Renaissance targets, you'll have no issues with these fights at all, because again, it'll be the same thing as before. You'll be able to level her up fairly easily because of the level of the targets, and then you'll be able to utilize that increased health value she'll give you over what clay will, as well as further boosting your missile speed, AoE, and things like that, so it just becomes a lot easier to destroy the targets, and you'll have a lot more health to play around with. So right now, the health of this fleet has under 12,000 in total. With Fleet Commander Victoria, you would have around level 55, 60, 70. You'd have around 20,000 hit points, upwards of 72,000 when you start to max her out. But we're getting towards the end of the video now. We still have 6 minutes left. Yeah, this fight took 2 attacks, but as you're going to see, as I said, if you actually fly carefully enough, you might be able to destroy the target if you can counter every single squadron that launches without a mistake. But that all depends. And speaking of mistakes, learning from the last one involving the suppressor, naturally I'm going to be able to counter it this time around. And you'll see what I mean when it comes for when the time comes for the suppressor to be destroyed. Just waiting while it gets ready to get into the fight. Now, what I try and do with the suppressor this time around is I try and keep it right at the very back edge of that fire arc, because I know that a single barrage from it will destroy the back 2 battleships. But here's something else that I realized. I could fight it with the opposite firing arc, but this is where I made a mistake. I underestimated the range of the carrier that I was fighting against. And that was something that as you noticed in the previous fights, I had been paying attention to the carrier's attack range. Well, I failed that time around, even though I had kept an eye at the beginning of the fight. Now, I just completely avoided the suppressor because look where I'm leading it. I'm taking it to the outer edge of the field where I can get it caught on the outside of the battlefield, where I can get it stuck on the outer edge and just gun it down. Because if it's sitting still, I shouldn't have any issues with destroying it. And the battleship AI is a little bit funky there, as you saw, as they weren't turning the fight back. They were trying to close in on the target, which in turn, since I'm in front of them, they're trying to get me into the firing arc that it should be facing me, but as you can see, they're not. There they go. I know most of these fights take a fairly long time, but the best way to look at it is this. These are essentially repairless fights, because 1 minute of repair time, well, you can stand up and you can get a drink while you're waiting. You can stand up and stretch your legs while you're waiting. You can do any number of things in that 1 minute. And now comes the dealing with the suppressor. Now, one thing I wanted to do there was I wanted to try and strafe, because one thing that it's doing is it's actually slower than my ships even when I'm strafing. And you see me, I'm trying to get off some cheeky shots at it by using its hitbox against it. It can't hit any of my ships right now, but I can hit it. And again, trying to get to trigger the hitbox, and there we go. One more barrage, and it's good and gone. Now, all that's left is dealing with that carrier. Now, this portion of the fight, I will admit, it was poor flying on my part, and it got some of the ships destroyed fairly quickly. And I'm positive that some more of you that are competent and actually pay attention to where squadrons are at should be able to counter them, but keep in mind that at times desync will happen, and they will not actually be where they're at. No damage taken for that one. And now the fight ends, and it goes to the next one. Now, let me observe this, because I want to see if there was anything I could have done differently to actually fight them and win. And I did reform the fleet, because one thing I wanted to do was change the fleet formation, because I wanted them to be centered around the mouse cursor and things like that, because it's typically how I play. I move everything around with a center to the fleet. And that's true even in this. So one ship, because I lost one, goes right in the center, and then the fleet is reformed. Now, the attack range on this carrier, it's about 15,000 meters out, because that's the mobility support field, because at the beginning of the fight you saw them accelerating out away from it. So it's using the agility support field, and all of the support fields you can equip on, well, most of them have high range. Well, that one has the longest, at 11,000 meters. How'd you like that? Now, must have panicked there, but it did hurt. But that's going to be it for now, everybody. Be safe Be safe out there in the void. Happy hunting, and as always, I'll see you in the next video.